To the digital world, she was a woman who appeared to have it all, captured in high-definition video, living a carefree existence on the lakes of Texas, laughing with friends and embracing the fast life. But while the cameras were rolling on a scene of leisure, a disturbing reality was being carefully concealed just a few miles away. We are about to unravel a timeline of deception that spanned nearly a decade, exposing how a mother allegedly curated a perfect public facade to hide the fact that one of her children had quietly vanished from the face of the earth. This is an investigation into the infrastructure of silence that allowed a young individual to disappear in plain sight, right under the nose of the system designed to protect her. As we prepare to peel back the layers of this complex case, please take a moment to press the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is essential in helping us bring these forgotten stories to light and advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves. The unraveling of this mystery did not begin with a confession or a body, but with a simple, routine knock on a door that was never meant to be opened. In the spring of 2025, the atmosphere in the Texas capital was vibrant. Yet within a quiet residential complex, a disturbing reality was about to be uncovered. On a seemingly ordinary afternoon, law enforcement officials arrived at an apartment unit, responding to a request for a welfare check. Such checks are a standard procedure in municipal policing, often initiated by concerned neighbors, school administrators, or distant relatives who sense that something in a household has gone awry. In this instance, the inquiry would unravel a complex web of secrecy that had been maintained for years. According to official reports released later, the officers approached the residence with the standard protocol expected in these situations. The initial interaction with the head of the household, identified as Ava Marie Gonzalez, appeared routine. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Gonzalez presented a calm demeanor, a trait that would later become a focal point of psychological analysis regarding the case. However, as authorities proceeded to inspect the premises to ensure the safety of all inhabitants, the veneer of normalcy began to fracture. The layout of the apartment was typical for the area, but the conditions discovered within were anything but standard. As investigators moved through the living spaces, they encountered 6 young individuals. While the presence of a large family in a compact living space is not inherently suspicious, the subsequent discovery in a rear bedroom shifted the nature of the call from a welfare check to a crime scene investigation. Inside a modified storage space within one of the bedrooms, officers located a 7th individual. This young female family member was found in a state of severe physical distress. Medical professionals who later assessed the individual described a condition of profound malnutrition, noting that her physical development was significantly behind what is expected for a person of her biological development. Reports indicate that this individual had been confined to this small, restrictive space for extended periods. The door to this enclosure reportedly utilized a locking mechanism designed to prevent exit from the inside, a detail that prosecutors would later highlight as evidence of intentional confinement. The discovery prompted an immediate escalation. Emergency medical services were summoned to transport the young female to a local hospital for urgent care. Meanwhile, the remaining 6 siblings were taken into protective custody. It is important to note that at this stage, the investigation was focused primarily on the immediate welfare of the residents present. The officers on the scene had no reason to suspect that the head count of the family was incomplete. They believed they had secured all members of the Gonzalez household. Legal analysts observing the case have noted that the threshold for removing individuals from a home is high, requiring clear and immediate evidence of danger. The conditions in which the 7th individual was found, described in court documents as life-threateningly underweight and deprived of basic necessities, met and exceeded this legal standard. The allegations suggested a systematic pattern of neglect, where food and water were strictly rationed. One detail that emerged in early reports was the allegation that the individual was sustained on a minimal diet, purportedly consisting of a single processed food item and a limited amount of water daily. As the news of the arrest of Ava Marie Gonzalez broke, The community reaction was one of shock and disbelief. Neighbors interviewed by local media outlets expressed that they had seen the family but had no indication of the severity of the situation unfolding behind closed doors. This phenomenon, often referred to by sociologists as urban isolation, highlights how severe domestic issues can go undetected even in densely populated living arrangements. The arrest of Gonzalez on charges related to injury to a family member marked the beginning of a legal saga. However, unknown to the officers standing in that apartment in April of 2025, this intervention was merely the first thread to be pulled. The documentation process that followed the removal of the siblings would soon reveal a discrepancy that transformed a case of severe neglect into a homicide investigation. The count of individuals found in the home did not match the number of birth records associated with the mother. There was an absence that had been silent for nearly a decade. A missing branch of the family tree that no one had realized was gone. This initial welfare check, while successful in rescuing the individuals present, inadvertently opened the door to a much darker question. Where was the eighth member of the family? The silence surrounding this missing person would soon become the loudest aspect of the investigation, challenging the very systems designed to protect the vulnerable. Experts in criminal psychology often point to the facade of normalcy maintained by perpetrators of domestic crimes. In this case, the ability of the suspect to interact calmly with police at the door, while a family member was in critical condition merely feet away, suggests a high level of compartmentalization. This behavior often delays detection, as law enforcement relies heavily on behavioral cues to establish probable cause for deeper searches. This chapter highlights a critical vulnerability in social safety nets. The fact that the conditions within the apartment persisted until 2025 raises questions about external oversight. Educational institutions, medical providers, and social services rely on consistent engagement to track welfare. When a parent actively withdraws from these systems or manipulates them, the check-ins that society relies upon to catch abuse fail. The investigation into the Gonzalez household serves as a case study in how easily a family unit can detach from societal oversight, leaving the most vulnerable members without an advocate until a crisis forces intervention. As the initial shock of the welfare check began to ripple through the local community, a parallel investigation was launched. Not into the physical evidence found within the apartment, but into the digital footprint of the woman at the center of the allegations. While Ava Marie Gonzalez sat in custody, investigators and internet sleuths alike began to piece together a profile that stood in stark, chilling contrast to the grim reality discovered by law enforcement. The image that emerged was not one of a struggling guardian, but rather that of a woman who appeared to be deeply immersed in a vibrant, carefree social scene. In the months leading up to her arrest in the spring of 2025, the digital record paints a picture of a life lived at high volume. Videos and social media posts, later analyzed by news outlets and detectives, showcased a woman who seemed to prioritize what some have termed the fast life. These recordings, many of which date back to 2024, depict Gonzalez frequenting nightlife venues, engaging in festivities, and projecting an image of absolute freedom. One specific piece of digital evidence, which has been widely circulated in media reports, shows Gonzalez on a boat, seemingly enjoying a day of leisure. In the footage, she is seen consuming beverages and celebrating, her demeanor appearing completely untroubled. To the casual observer, there was no indication of the chaotic domestic situation that would later be unveiled. This disconnect between her public presentation and private responsibilities became a critical point of interest for the prosecution. To confirm that the woman in these celebratory videos was indeed the same individual, now facing serious charges, investigators utilized distinctive physical markers. A close examination of the footage revealed a specific tattoo of a heart located on her neck, a marking that perfectly matched the booking photograph taken by police at the time of her detention. This ability to maintain a pristine, social facade while allegedly concealing a dark secret at home suggests a high degree of calculation. Interviews with former associates have provided insight into how Gonzalez managed this dual existence. One individual, who identified herself as a former friend, spoke to reporters about Gonzalez's character, describing her as a mastermind who believed she had total control over the people in her orbit. According to these accounts, Gonzalez was not merely lucky in evading detection. She was reportedly strategic. The former friend noted that Gonzalez possessed a real good way of hiding things and was exceptionally discreet when it came to the details of her household. This discretion was allegedly enforced through manipulation. The investigation revealed that Gonzalez worked to isolate the various members of her extended family, specifically the grandmothers of the young family members. By plotting these relatives against one another, she ensured they would not communicate. This strategy of triangulation effectively prevented the grandmothers from comparing notes or realizing that certain family members were unaccounted for. The narrative provided by these associates depicts a woman who was very manipulative, actively engineering conflicts to maintain a wall of silence around her home life. She orchestrated a scenario where she was the sole gatekeeper of information, allowing her to live the party life publicly while ensuring that no one looked too closely at the welfare of her dependents. In the modern era of criminal investigation, a suspect's online presence often serves as a form of character evidence. In this case, the curated joy visible on Gonzalez's social media profiles serves as a psychological anchor for the prosecution. It challenges the defense of a mother overwhelmed by circumstance, suggesting instead a person who had the time, resources, and mental energy to pursue personal leisure while allegedly neglecting basic duties of care. This phenomenon is often observed in cases involving dual-life suspects, individuals who successfully compartmentalize their behavior to an extreme degree. The allegation that Gonzalez plotted to keep the grandmothers apart is perhaps the most revealing detail regarding her intent. In forensic psychology, this is known as gatekeeping. By controlling the flow of communication between extended family members, a perpetrator can create a vacuum where abuse or absence goes unnoticed. If grandmother A believes the family member is with grandmother B, and vice versa, and they never speak to confirm, the individual can effectively vanish without raising an alarm. This deliberate severance of family ties is often the primary reason why such cases can span years without intervention. The description of her as a mastermind by those who knew her indicates that this was not a passive failure of the system, but an active, calculated effort to deceive. Following the extraction of the individuals from the Gonzalez apartment, the investigative focus shifted from the chaotic scene of the welfare check to the sterile, objective environment of the medical examination room. It was here, under the bright lights of clinical assessment, that the full extent of the neglect alleged by authorities was quantified. The condition of the young individual found confined within the residence became the primary catalyst for the legal charges that would soon follow. Medical professionals tasked with evaluating the young female provided a sobering assessment of her physical state. According to reports released by the Austin Police Department, the individual was found in a severely underweight condition at the time of her rescue. To put this into perspective, medical growth charts indicate that this weight is typical for a toddler, yet this individual was biologically significantly older. The disparity between her chronological development and her physical mass was a glaring indicator of long-term nutritional deprivation. The medical findings went beyond mere weight loss. Physicians determined that the individual was suffering from severe malnutrition, a condition so advanced that it had reportedly resulted in permanent damage to her neurological development. This diagnosis suggests that the deprivation of essential nutrients had occurred over a prolonged period, affecting the brain's ability to develop and function normally. The gravity of this finding elevated the case from a matter of poor parenting to a criminal investigation involving serious bodily injury. As detectives interviewed the other individuals residing in the home, a disturbing narrative regarding the daily routine of the household began to emerge. The siblings provided consistent accounts regarding the diet provided to the confined individual. It is alleged that Virginia Gonzalez severely restricted the young female's daily food and water intake to a bare minimum. This meager rationing, devoid of necessary vitamins or caloric density, aligns with the medical evidence of severe wasting and developmental stunting. The investigation also sought to understand the rationale provided for such severe treatment. According to statements allegedly made by the other children in the home, the mother had targeted this specific daughter because she was perceived as always getting into stuff. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that the confinement was often used as a punitive measure for the individual's inability to control her bladder. Rather than seeking medical attention for this physiological issue, the response was allegedly to lock the individual away. Based on these findings, the state of Texas moved swiftly. Ava Marie Gonzalez was formally taken into custody and has been detained since the spring of last year. She faces 3 distinct charges related to the abuse and injury of a child. These charges reflect not just the act of confinement, but the serious, lasting bodily injury sustained due to the lack of nutrition and care. The medical data in this case serves as a silent witness. The weight of 29 pounds is a critical piece of forensic evidence. In legal terms, this objective number counters any defense that might claim the individual was simply sickly or had a naturally slim build. Combined with the diagnosis of permanent brain damage, the prosecution can build a timeline of neglect. It proves that the harm was not an isolated incident or a momentary lapse in judgment, but a sustained campaign of deprivation that fundamentally altered the individual's physiology. The reasons allegedly given for the confinement, getting into stuff and bladder control issues, are classic examples of how perpetrators rationalize their behavior. In forensic psychology, this is often termed victim blaming. By framing the dependent's natural behaviors or medical struggles as misbehavior, the guardian creates a justification for punishment. The tragedy lies in the cycle. The severe malnutrition likely exacerbated the inability to control bodily functions, which in turn led to further confinement and restriction of water. It is a closed loop of logic that resulted in nearly fatal consequences for the dependent involved. In the days following the initial intervention at the Gonzalez residence, the investigation transitioned from a physical securement of the scene to a forensic audit of the family's history. While the immediate focus had been on the medical stabilization of the individual found in the closet, detectives began the procedural task of cross-referencing the individuals taken into protective custody with official state records. It was during this administrative census that the scope of the case expanded dramatically, revealing a discrepancy that would haunt the investigative team. Initially, law enforcement authorities operated under the assumption that the household consisted of the mother, Ava Gonzalez, and the 7 siblings found within the apartment unit. The count seemed consistent with the living arrangements and the immediate observations made by officers on site. However, as investigators delved into the vital statistics and birth registries to ensure all legal guardianships were properly documented, a glaring inconsistency emerged. The official records indicated that Ava Gonzalez was the mother of not 7, but 8 individuals. The name associated with this 8th record was Ava Marie Gonzalez. Confronted with this bureaucratic anomaly, detectives returned to the gathered evidence and the remaining family members to account for Ava's whereabouts. A thorough search of the premises had already been conducted, and it was confirmed that she was not present in the apartment at the time of the welfare check. This realization triggered an immediate and urgent missing persons inquiry, distinct from the abuse allegations already filed. As detectives attempted to construct a timeline of Ava's life, they encountered a profound silence. According to police reports, the last confirmed sighting of Ava Marie Gonzalez dates back to December of 2017. At that time, she was in the custody of her mother, Ava Gonzalez. Since that date, the trail effectively vanishes. What troubled investigators most was the complete lack of a paper trail for the years following 2017. In modern society, it is exceptionally difficult for an individual to exist without leaving a footprint in public systems. Yet, inquiries into local school districts revealed that there were no enrollment records for Ava, nor essentially for any of the Gonzalez siblings. There was nothing for teachers or administrators to track or report, as the individuals had seemingly never entered the educational system. Furthermore, a review of police databases showed that Ava was never reported missing. For nearly a decade, while one daughter was allegedly subjected to confinement and the others lived in the apartment, one sibling was simply gone. There were no calls to emergency services, no appeals to the public, and no filings with missing persons bureaus. The Austin Police Department's missing persons detectives expressed serious concern for Ava's welfare, explicitly linking their apprehension to the severe circumstances in which her sibling was discovered. The logic was grim, but sound. If a family member found in the home was suffering from life-altering neglect, the unexplained absence of another member raised the possibility of an even more tragic outcome. This chapter of the investigation underscores a frightening reality within the social infrastructure: the possibility of erasure. In a digitized world, we assume that existence is verified by data, school grades, medical records, and social security entries. However, this case demonstrates that if a guardian actively chooses to withhold a dependent from these institutions, that individual can effectively cease to exist in the eyes of the state. Ava Marie Gonzalez did not fall through the cracks. She was allegedly kept entirely off the map. The fact that a person can be unaccounted for since 2017 without raising a single red flag points to a systemic reliance on reactive rather than proactive welfare checks. Systems typically respond to truancy, school absence, or medical irregularities. When an individual is never enrolled in school and never taken to a doctor, the triggers that typically alert authorities are never pulled. This infrastructure of silence, as some sociologists term it, allows for long-term concealment of absence, requiring an external event, like the unrelated welfare check in 2025, to finally bring the truth to light. The discrepancy in the head count was not just a clerical error. It was the first tangible evidence of a potential capital crime. Once the administrative discrepancy regarding the family headcount was confirmed, investigators faced an immediate and daunting practical challenge. They needed to tell the public who they were looking for. In standard missing persons cases, law enforcement agencies are typically inundated with recent photographs, school portraits, family vacation snapshots, or candid digital images from mobile devices. However, the case of Ava Marie Gonzalez proved to be a disturbing anomaly in the digital age. As detectives scourged through the seized electronic devices and physical albums found within the Gonzalez residence, they encountered a void. According to statements from law enforcement, there are no existing photographs of Ava Marie Gonzalez after late 2017. The last confirmed visual record of the missing individual dates back to when she was in the very early stages of development, a period described by police as December of 2017. Since that time, while the world moved forward and technology became increasingly ubiquitous, this specific family member seemingly ceased to be captured on camera. This absence of visual data presented a significant hurdle for the search efforts. How does the public search for a face that no one has seen in nearly a decade? To bridge this gap, authorities turned to forensic technology. Utilizing the limited photographic evidence from her early years and applying biological growth algorithms, specialists created an age progression image. This computer-generated composite was released to the media in hopes that it would spark recognition in someone, a neighbor, a passerby, or a distant relative. The release of this image was a pivotal moment in the investigation. It highlighted the stark contrast between the visible and the invisible within the Gonzalez household. While Virginia Gonzalez, the mother, had a documented and vibrant online presence, filled with high-definition videos of social gatherings and boat trips from as recently as 2024, her daughter had been completely erased from the visual narrative of the family. The police noted that there was nothing for schools to track or report because there were no records of the Gonzalez children attending, further deepening the difficulty of the search. The missing person poster that began circulating in Austin featured this forensic approximation. Authorities clarified to the public that this was a prediction of her appearance, not a photograph. The caption accompanying the image noted that she had been missing since 2017, a fact that shocked the community given that the investigation only began in the spring of 2025. The gap between her disappearance and the start of the search was vast, a silence spanning years where no one knew to look for her because no one knew she was missing. The digital ghost in the 21st century. It is almost unprecedented for an individual to lack a digital footprint for such an extended period. We live in an era of constant surveillance and self-documentation. For a parent to maintain a robust social media profile for themselves while simultaneously ensuring that one specific family member never appears in the background of a photo or video suggests a high level of situational awareness. It implies a deliberate curation of reality. The absence of photos is not merely a lack of sentimentality. In a legal context, it can be interpreted as evidence of concealment. The reliance on an age progression image adds a layer of tragedy to the procedural search. These images, while scientifically grounded, are ultimately best guesses. They rely on the assumption of normal development and health. However, given the medical condition of the sibling found in the apartment, who suffered from severe developmental delays due to malnutrition, there is a grim possibility that the age progression image depicts a level of health that the missing individual never achieved. The public is looking for a healthy face projected by a computer, while the reality of the individual's condition remains a dark unknown. This chapter of the investigation underscores the concept of identity erasure. By withholding the individual from school, medical care, and family photographs, the Guardian effectively removed the subject from the collective consciousness of the community. As noted in the transcripts, even extended family members were manipulated and kept apart to prevent them from realizing the absence. This allowed the years to pass without inquiry, turning a living person into a memory, and eventually into a mystery that law enforcement is now scrambling to solve. As the investigation into the whereabouts of Ava Marie Gonzalez deepened, detectives encountered a complex obstacle that extended beyond physical evidence, a sophisticated web of conflicting stories designed to obscure the truth. According to court records obtained by local media outlets, Virginia Marie Gonzalez did not offer a single, consistent explanation for her daughter's absence. Instead, she allegedly provided a series of divergent narratives to different people, family members, former partners, and state officials, creating a labyrinth of falsehoods that effectively kept anyone from verifying the child's safety. The investigative team, tasked with reconstructing the timeline of the missing individual, found themselves dismantling these fabrications one by one. The first significant narrative emerged from interviews with a former boyfriend of Virginia Gonzalez, who is also the father of one of her other children. This witness told police that Gonzalez had explicitly distanced herself from Ava. He reported that Gonzalez claimed Ava was not actually her biological daughter, but rather the child of her sister. This fabrication went further, with Gonzalez allegedly asserting that the young individual was living comfortably with an aunt and uncle, thereby removing any expectation for the boyfriend to see or interact with her. To bolster this distancing strategy, Gonzalez reportedly disparaged the physical condition of the missing family member. The ex-boyfriend told investigators that Gonzalez referred to Ava using derogatory terms regarding substance exposure, claiming she was born premature, was sickly, and appeared malnourished due to health problems. However, detectives were able to swiftly disprove this characterization through objective medical data. Hospital records obtained by the police confirmed that Ava Marie Gonzalez was born full-term at a healthy weight of 6 pounds, with absolutely no recorded complications. The disparity between the medical reality and the mother's description suggested a deliberate attempt to dehumanize the missing individual and explain away any potential signs of distress that witnesses might have previously observed. A second, contradictory narrative was presented to state authorities. Court documents revealed that in November of 2023, Child Protective Services received information stating that Ava had moved out of the home to live with her biological father. This explanation provided a convenient administrative closure, allowing the agency to believe the individual was safe in the custody of another guardian. However, when investigators pursued this lead, it unraveled immediately. Detectives successfully located and contacted Ava's biological father, who resides in Mexico. During his interview with law enforcement, he categorically denied ever having custody of his daughter. He provided yet another variation of the story, telling investigators that Gonzalez had informed him that Ava was living with a different family in San Antonio. He clarified that he had been led to believe she was safe in another city, a claim that effectively neutralized his potential concern. This investigation also uncovered statements from the eldest sibling, currently 14 years old. According to police reports, this sibling initially told detectives that Ava had been given away to a family when she was approximately 3 years old. This account, likely fed to the younger family members by the mother, served to normalize the absence within the household, framing the disappearance as a benign adoption rather than a vanish. The sheer variety of these explanations, living with an aunt, living with a father, living with a family in San Antonio, demonstrates a tactical approach to deception, often seen in cases of concealment. By tailoring the lie to the specific audience, the suspect ensures that no two people compare notes. The ex-boyfriend is told she is a niece. The father is told she is in San Antonio. The state is told she is with the father. This technique, known as compartmentalization of information, prevents any single party from having a full picture, thereby stalling any potential intervention. The allegation that Gonzalez used such stigmatizing language to describe her own daughter, despite medical records proving otherwise, is particularly significant from a psychological perspective. By casting the dependent as inherently sickly or damaged, a guardian can preemptively justify their absence or poor condition to outsiders. If a witness asks, "Why does she look unwell?" or "Why is she not here?" the prefabricated lie about her health serves as a plausible, albeit false, shield against suspicion. This chapter of the investigation exposes the fragility of custodial verification. The fact that a claim of living with the father could allegedly satisfy inquiries without direct confirmation from the father himself highlights a procedural gap. As noted in the analysis of the case, these unverified narratives allowed years to pass, from 2017 to 2025, before the contradictory nature of the stories was finally consolidated by law enforcement. The San Antonio story and the Mexico story existed in parallel, unchallenged, until the unrelated welfare check collapsed the house of cards. In the complex world of family welfare investigations, paper trails are often assumed to be the ultimate source of truth. Documents, signatures, and contact logs form the backbone of the safety net designed to protect vulnerable individuals. However, as detectives peeled back the layers of the Gonzalez case, they discovered that this very infrastructure had been weaponized to maintain a wall of silence. The investigation into the years-long disappearance of Ava Marie Gonzalez revealed not just a lack of records, but the active creation of false ones, a strategy that successfully kept authorities at bay for an extended period. A critical focal point of this inquiry centers on a specific interaction that occurred in November of 2023. According to court records obtained by local media outlets, Child Protective Services had contact with the family during this time. In the course of their duties, caseworkers were presented with a narrative that seemed to resolve any lingering questions about the missing daughter's whereabouts. The agency was reportedly informed that the individual had moved out of the mother's home to live with her biological father. To substantiate this claim, a document was produced. On the surface, this paperwork appeared to be a standard verification of safety, a bureaucratic all-clear that would allow the case to be closed or the inquiry to be suspended. Crucially, the document bore the signature of one of the grandmothers of the Gonzalez siblings. In the eyes of an overburdened social service system, the attestation of a matriarchal figure, a grandmother, carries significant weight. It implies family oversight and provides a secondary layer of confirmation that the individual is safe. However, once the homicide investigation began in earnest in 2025, police scrutinized this document with forensic rigor. When investigators tracked down the grandmother whose name appeared on the paper, the narrative collapsed. During questioning, the grandmother vehemently denied ever signing the document. She stated unequivocally that the signature was not hers and, perhaps even more damning, that the phone number listed next to her name did not belong to her. Law enforcement subsequently confirmed these assertions. The investigation determined that the signature was a forgery and the contact information was fraudulent. This revelation suggests a calculated effort to fabricate evidence. By presenting a forged document, the suspect allegedly created a loophole in the safety net. If a caseworker called the number listed, they would likely reach a confederate or a dead end, rather than the grandmother who might have revealed the truth that she had not seen her granddaughter in years. This tactic aligns with witness statements describing Virginia Gonzalez as a mastermind of manipulation. Former associates have noted her ability to plot the grandmothers against one another, creating a dynamic of friction that ensured they would not speak to each other. By keeping the extended family divided and manufacturing false consensus through forged documents, the suspect effectively built an infrastructure of silence. The left hand did not know what the right hand was doing, and the state was presented with a falsified picture of family unity. The use of a forged document in 2023 serves as a powerful example of a bureaucratic decoy. In high-volume social work environments, caseworkers are often managing dozens of complex files simultaneously. When a guardian presents a signed, seemingly legitimate document stating a dependent is with another parent, it satisfies the immediate procedural requirement. It checks a box. This case demonstrates how easily a perpetrator can exploit the system's reliance on honor and documentation. The forgery was not just a lie. It was a tool used to buy time. Specifically, another 1.5 years of silence before the final discovery. The manipulation of the grandmothers is a critical psychological component of this case. In many families, the extended network, aunts, uncles, grandparents, serves as an informal safety monitor. If a parent is struggling, a grandmother often steps in. However, by allegedly plotting the relatives against one another and preventing them from communicating, the suspect removed this layer of protection. This ensured that no one was comparing notes. One grandmother may have thought the daughter was with the other, while the other believed she was with the father. This engineered confusion is a hallmark of sophisticated concealment strategies, allowing a missing individual to vanish in plain sight while surrounded by relatives who believe she is safe elsewhere. Legal analysts have pointed out that this incident exposes a vulnerability in verification protocols. While it is impossible to verify every signature in every case, the ease with which a false phone number and a forged signature derailed the inquiry into Ava's whereabouts for over a year is alarming. It highlights the need for more robust cross-referencing, such as independent verification of contact details or direct, face-to-face confirmation when a change of custody is claimed, rather than reliance on a piece of paper that can be easily manufactured. In the absence of physical remains or a confession, criminal investigations often turn on the reliability of human memory. For the detectives assigned to the case of Ava Marie Gonzalez, the breakthrough did not come from a DNA swab or a surveillance camera, but from the recollection of a family member who had carried a burden of silence for years. The most critical narrative in the investigation emerged from a forensic interview with the eldest sibling, an adolescent who provided a chilling, first-hand account of the events that allegedly led to the disappearance of his sister, according to court documents obtained by local news station KXAN. This key witness, who was a young child at the time of the alleged incident, sat down with forensic interviewers to reconstruct a specific memory from early 2018. The setting of this memory was not the family apartment, but a motel room. A detail that investigators note often indicates a period of transient housing or instability within a family unit. The testimony provided by the sibling is described in legal filings as both detailed and harrowing. He recounted a specific day when the family was staying at this temporary lodging. According to his statement, he was positioned in the main area of the motel room while his mother, Virginia Gonzalez, and his younger sister, Ava, were in the bathroom. The witness told investigators that he could hear the sound of running water, accompanied by disturbing sounds of distress coming from behind the closed door. The narrative takes a grim turn as the witness described peering into the bathroom. He alleged that he observed a confrontation between his mother and Ava inside the bathroom while the water was running. The sibling stated that the chaotic sounds of distress continued until the water was turned off, at which point the screaming stopped abruptly. This silence, following such intense commotion, is a focal point for the prosecution, who allege it marks the moment of the child's death. What followed, according to the witness, was a series of actions that suggest a calculated attempt to conceal the outcome of the incident. The sibling told police that he watched his mother dress the unresponsive child. She then reportedly placed Ava into a car seat. When the sibling likely looked for an explanation for his sister's lack of movement, Virginia Gonzalez allegedly provided a simple, pacifying answer. She claimed that Ava was merely sleeping. The explanation for Ava's subsequent permanent absence was equally swift. The witness stated that his mother told him Ava was going to live with a new mom and dad. This fabrication served a dual purpose. It explained why the child was being taken away in the car seat, and it preemptively stopped any questions about when she would return. Perhaps the most disturbing element of the sibling's testimony was his observation of his mother's demeanor immediately following these events. Rather than appearing distressed, remorseful, or panicked, the witness recalled that his mother seemed happy, describing her as acting like a totally new person once the child was removed from their lives. As the investigation into the disappearance of Ava Marie Gonzalez transitioned from gathering witness testimony to building a legal case, prosecutors faced a significant hurdle, securing the continued detention of the primary suspect while potential capital charges were being formulated. Virginia Marie Gonzalez was already in custody regarding the severe injury of the dependent found in her apartment. But as the scope of the inquiry expanded to include a possible homicide, the state moved to ensure she could not be released on bail. During a pivotal bond hearing in the summer, following her arrest, the district attorney's office presented new allegations that offered a darker glimpse into the suspect's background. Prosecutors argued that Gonzalez was a significant flight risk, citing her alleged ties to Mexico and, more shockingly, involvement in illicit cross-border activities. These assertions suggested that the fast lifestyle observed in her social media videos, characterized by boating and nightlife, may have been supported by illicit activities that extended beyond the domestic sphere. Based on these arguments, the court made the decision to drastically increase her bond. Originally set at $75,000, the amount was boosted to $250,000. This legal maneuver was designed to keep Gonzalez incarcerated, while detectives worked to corroborate the harrowing testimony provided by her eldest sibling regarding the motel incident. Legal analysts observing the proceedings noted that the prosecution's strategy relied heavily on establishing a pattern of conduct. In criminal law, when a suspect is accused of harming one individual, evidence of how they treated others in their care can sometimes be admissible to show intent or absence of mistake. In this case, the condition of the young individual found in the closet became the evidentiary anchor for the missing person case. Austin Police Department detectives explicitly stated that they were seriously concerned about the welfare of the missing Ava Marie Gonzalez. Precisely because of the circumstances in which Ava's 7-year-old sibling was found. The logic was grimly circular. The verified abuse of one child validated the feared fate of the other. Investigators pointed to a disturbing parallel between the two cases. Regarding the missing Ava, Gonzalez had reportedly told her ex-boyfriend that the child suffered from conditions related to substance exposure, claiming she was sickly and looked malnourished. Behavioral profilers suggest that this discrepancy reveals a psychological projection. The suspect allegedly fabricated a medical history for the missing daughter to explain away her potential poor condition or disappearance, while simultaneously inflicting actual medical distress on the daughter who remained in the home. The sickness was not a biological reality for the children. It was, according to the state's theory, a condition manufactured by the mother. By linking the human smuggling allegations with the severe domestic neglect, the prosecution painted a portrait of an individual who viewed human life, whether her own children or others, as commodities or burdens to be managed. This hearing marked a turning point where the case shifted from a localized story of child welfare to a broader criminal narrative involving international ties and alleged capital offenses. The prior bad acts doctrine in many legal jurisdictions. Prosecutors use the doctrine of prior bad acts or pattern of evidence to bridge the gap in cases where physical evidence is missing. Since authorities have not recovered the remains of Ava Marie Gonzalez, they cannot perform an autopsy to determine the cause of death. Instead, they must rely on the living autopsy of the sibling found in the closet. By demonstrating that Gonzalez was capable of confining a dependent and withholding food to the point of permanent brain damage, the state argues that the leap to lethal violence against the missing sibling is a plausible escalation of the same behavior. The financial nexus, the introduction of ties to human smuggling, adds a complex layer to the investigation. It potentially explains the financial resources Gonzalez appeared to have in her social media videos, despite no clear record of traditional employment. Furthermore, it provides a chilling context for the false narratives she spun about the missing daughter living in Mexico. If the suspect was indeed involved in cross-border illicit activities, the claim that her daughter was sent across the border was a lie grounded in her own reality, a convenient fiction that used her criminal connections as a cover story for a domestic tragedy. The flight risk calculation, the decision to raise the bond to $250,000, reflects the court's recognition of the severity of the developing case. In homicide investigations, particularly those involving nobody scenarios, the risk of a suspect fleeing is considered extremely high. If Gonzalez were to use her alleged connections to cross into Mexico, extradition could become a lengthy and difficult diplomatic process. The increased bond effectively froze the board, ensuring that the suspect would remain in Travis County while the state prepared to upgrade the charges from injury to capital murder. Legal analysts often debate the weight of testimony provided by minors, particularly when there is a significant time gap between the event and the interview. However, forensic psychology suggests that flashbulb memories of highly emotional or traumatic events, can be retained with remarkable clarity even by young children. The specificity of the details provided by the sibling, such as the sound of the water and the distinct change in his mother's mood, lends credibility to his account. In a nobody homicide case, this type of direct eyewitness testimony is often the linchpin of the prosecution's strategy. The alleged explanation that Ava was going to a new mom and dad is a common psychological tactic used by perpetrators to placate other family members. It reframes a tragic loss as a positive transition, effectively gaslighting the remaining siblings. By presenting the disappearance as an adoption or a rehoming, the guardian suppresses the natural grief or alarm that the other children might feel, replacing it with a vague sense that their sibling is better off elsewhere. The witness's observation that his mother acted happy and like a new person after the incident is significant. In the context of criminal profiling, this reaction can be interpreted as relief behavior. If the guardian viewed the dependent as a burden or a source of stress, as suggested by previous comments about the child being sickly or getting into stuff, the elimination of that burden might result in a temporary euphoric release. This stark lack of appropriate affect is often used by prosecutors to demonstrate a lack of remorse and to argue for the presence of malice. While the testimony is subjective, it aligns with the objective timeline established by investigators. The police believe Ava died on or around January 2nd, 2018. The siblings' memory of the motel incident corresponds with this period, providing a narrative overlay to the abrupt cessation of any sightings of the child. This convergence of witness testimony and the timeline of disappearance strengthens the state's theory that the child did not simply wander off or move to Mexico, but was the victim of a specific, fatal event. While investigators on the outside were piecing together the timeline of a disappearance spanning nearly a decade, a critical development was unfolding within the walls of the Travis County Correctional Complex. Since her arrest in April of 2025, Ava Marie Gonzalez has remained in custody, separated from society, but not entirely silent. In the world of criminal prosecution, the period between arrest and trial is often a waiting game. Yet it is also a time when defendants frequently inadvertently provide the state with its most damaging ammunition. Their own words. As the legal teams prepared for the upcoming trial, the prosecution introduced evidence gathered from the monitored communications of the suspect. It is standard protocol in correctional facilities for calls and interactions to be recorded, a fact known to inmates but often forgotten in moments of stress or camaraderie. According to court documents obtained by local news outlets, one such interaction has become a cornerstone of the state's evolving theory of the case. The filing details a conversation between Ava Gonzalez and another individual currently incarcerated at the same facility. In this exchange, Gonzalez reportedly dropped her guard. The recording captures the defendant expressing deep anxiety regarding her future, specifically voicing a concern that the authorities are going to lock her up for an extended duration. The context of this fear is pivotal. At the time of the recording, she was formally facing charges related to the injury of the family member found in the closet. However, the response from the other inmates suggests that the conversation had drifted toward a darker, uncharged subject. The other inmate, responding to Gonzalez's fear of permanent incarceration, asked a clarifying question. For what? The baby. This brief, three-word inquiry allegedly refers to the missing Ava Marie Gonzalez. Legal analysts emphasize that this exchange is significant because it implies that the disappearance and potential death of the missing daughter was a topic of conversation within the jail, even before formal murder charges were filed. It suggests that Gonzalez was aware that the investigation was pivoting toward the missing individual, despite her earlier attempts to claim the child was safe in Mexico or San Antonio. While these recordings were being analyzed, the legal machinery of the plea bargaining process was in motion. In November of 2025, the district attorney's office extended a formal offer to resolve the pending charges regarding the injury to a child. The state proposed a sentence of 40 years in prison in exchange for a guilty plea. This offer reflected the severity of the medical condition of the surviving sibling, who suffered permanent injury due to malnutrition. However, the defense rejected this overture swiftly and publicly. Ava Gonzalez refused to accept the deal. Her attorney, J. Gabriel Hernandez, did not merely decline the offer. He characterized it in the media as utterly absurd. This aggressive stance indicates that the defense believes the state's case regarding the injury charge is vulnerable, or that the proposed sentence was disproportionate to the evidence presented. By rejecting the 40-year term, Gonzalez has opted to take her chances with a jury, a high-stakes gamble given the emerging evidence regarding the missing sibling. The rejection of the plea deal effectively forced the hand of the investigators. With the trial date approaching in late January and no resolution on the table, the police expedited their homicide inquiry. It was shortly after this plea rejection that authorities moved to secure the search warrant that would officially accuse Gonzalez of the murder of her missing daughter, transforming the upcoming legal battle from an abuse case into a fight for her life against a potential capital sentence. Jailhouse recordings are a unique category of evidence. Unlike formal interrogations where a suspect is guarded and often advised by counsel, conversations with fellow inmates are unguarded. The quote "for what? The baby" serves as a form of adoptive admission. By not correcting the other inmate or denying that the baby was a reason for potential life imprisonment, the prosecution will argue that Gonzalez tacitly acknowledged the gravity of the situation regarding the missing individual. It establishes a link in the defendant's mind between her incarceration and the fate of Ava Marie. The decision to reject a 40-year plea deal is statistically rare in cases with significant physical evidence, such as the medical reports of the surviving sibling. However, from a strategic standpoint, the defense may have calculated that accepting a 40-year sentence would effectively be a life sentence, regardless. Furthermore, pleading guilty to the serious injury charge could have been used against her in a future murder trial as evidence of her character and conduct. By fighting the initial charge, the defense retains the ability to challenge the admissibility of evidence and the credibility of witnesses, including the 14-year-old sibling whose testimony is central to the state's theory. This chapter highlights the domino effect of criminal proceedings. The rejection of the plea deal in November acted as a catalyst. Had Gonzalez accepted the 40 years, the state might have been satisfied with the closure. By refusing, she pushed the state to utilize its ultimate leverage, the capital murder investigation. The timeline suggests that the search warrant and the subsequent leaking of the murder allegations were, in part, a response to the stalemate in negotiations, raising the stakes to the absolute maximum under Texas law. As the weight of the investigation shifted from the local police department to the district attorney's office, the legal battle lines began to form. While the prosecution focused on the expanding scope of the allegations, the defense team launched a vigorous counteroffensive, targeting the timing and the integrity of the state's disclosure. J. Gabriel Hernandez, the attorney representing Ava Marie Gonzalez, publicly challenged the introduction of the new search warrant, framing it not as a breakthrough in justice, but as a procedural maneuver designed to prejudice the proceedings. The timing of the warrant was indeed contentious. Authorities released details regarding the potential homicide investigation roughly 2 weeks before Gonzalez was slated to face a jury for the separate charges involving the injury to the family member found in the residence. Attorney Hernandez characterized this release as suspicious, suggesting that introducing such inflammatory allegations into the news cycle so close to the court date was a calculated attempt to poison the jury pool. In a statement released to local media, the defense argued that the state's case, as originally indicted, was weak. Hernandez asserted that the facts were being stretched to fit a narrative intended to convict his client of a higher charge than the evidence supported. The defense's position is that the sudden pivot to a murder investigation creates an unfair bias against Gonzalez, making it nearly impossible to select an impartial jury from the local community. To protect his client's constitutional rights, Hernandez announced plans to file motions for a continuance and a change of venue. A continuance would delay the trial, allowing the media storm to settle, while a change of venue would move the proceedings to a different county where potential jurors might be less familiar with the high-profile coverage. Legal analysts note that while such motions are standard in high-stakes cases, they are rarely granted without compelling evidence that a fair trial is impossible. The defense is essentially arguing that the court of public opinion has already delivered a verdict, rendering the actual courtroom process compromised before it has even begun. The request to move a trial is a significant legal gamble. In an era of digital information, finding a jurisdiction that is unaware of a major capital case is increasingly difficult. However, the defense's argument hinges on pretrial publicity. By releasing the details of the missing daughter's alleged fate just days before the trial for the abuse of the other daughter, the state effectively linked the two crimes in the public consciousness. The defense must now argue that no juror can look at the evidence of the abuse charge without subconsciously blaming the defendant for the unproven murder charge. The description of the state's case as weak is a classic defense tactic known as lowering expectations. By claiming the prosecution is desperate and stretching facts, the defense attempts to undermine the credibility of the investigators. If they can convince a judge that the timing of the warrant was malicious rather than coincidental, it could lead to the exclusion of certain evidence or a significant delay, giving the defense more time to locate exculpatory evidence or dismantle the witness testimony. The investigation into the Gonzalez household has evolved from a matter of domestic welfare into a pursuit of the highest penalty available under the law. According to the search warrant filed by Austin police, Authorities now believe that Ava Marie Gonzalez is no longer alive, with investigators pinpointing the date of the alleged fatal event to on or around January 2nd, 2018. This determination fundamentally alters the legal landscape for Virginia Gonzalez, elevating the potential consequences from imprisonment to capital punishment. In the state of Texas, intentionally causing the loss of life of a young individual under a certain age threshold is classified as a capital crime. This distinction is critical. Capital murder cases carry a burden of proof that is significantly higher, and procedural requirements that are far more rigorous than standard felony cases. The prosecution is not merely alleging neglect, they are alleging a specific, intentional act that resulted in death. However, the state faces a profound challenge. This is a nobody homicide investigation. Despite the detailed testimony from the eldest sibling regarding the events at the motel and the timeline established by missing records, physical remains have not been recovered. Prosecutors must prove that a death occurred and that the defendant caused it, without the forensic finality of an autopsy. The Austin Police Department has expanded the inquiry into a possible capital murder case based largely on circumstantial evidence and witness accounts. The allegations suggest that the suspect is responsible for the death of her daughter, yet the defense will likely highlight the absence of physical proof. The fact that the suspect is currently only charged with injury to a child regarding the surviving sibling creates a complex legal bifurcation. The state must decide whether to proceed with the current charges or pause to seek a grand jury indictment for capital murder, a decision that carries immense strategic risk. Prosecuting a murder case without a body is historically difficult, though not impossible. The state must build a circumstantial mosaic. This involves proving that the victim has ceased to exist. No financial activity, no medical records, no sightings, and that the cessation of life is the only logical explanation. In this case, the total silence since 2017 serves as the body of evidence. The shift to capital charges suggests that the prosecution believes they can prove specific intent. It is not enough to show that the mother was negligent or that an accident occurred. They must prove she intended to cause the death. The testimony about the bathroom incident and the alleged subsequent lack of remorse, appearing happy afterwards, will be crucial in establishing this mental state. Beyond the legal filings and court dates, the investigation has painted a disturbing psychological portrait of Virginia Marie Gonzalez. Friends, family, and investigators describe a woman who possessed a dual nature, capable of projecting a carefree, charismatic exterior while maintaining a rigid, controlling grip on her private sphere. This disconnect is central to understanding how the alleged crimes could go undetected for so long. Former associates have described Gonzalez using terms such as mastermind and manipulative. These descriptors are not used lightly. They refer to a specific pattern of behavior observed over years, wherein Gonzalez allegedly orchestrated the separation of her support system. By plotting the grandmothers of her children against one another, she ensured that the two people most likely to notice a missing family member were never in communication. This was not accidental isolation. It was, according to witnesses, a designed strategy to maintain control. The party mom persona, visible in videos from 2024, shows a woman unburdened by the gravity of her domestic reality. In these recordings, she appears to love the fast life, drinking and socializing on boats, seemingly without a care. This behavior stands in stark contrast to the conditions found in her apartment, where one child was confined to a closet and another was allegedly long deceased. Furthermore, the police interviews with former partners reveal a tendency to rewrite reality. The allegations that she called her healthy daughter a crack baby or claimed she was sickly demonstrate a psychological mechanism known as pathological lying or confabulation. By inventing medical issues for the victim, she potentially sought to garner sympathy for herself as a burdened mother, while simultaneously laying the groundwork to explain the child's eventual disappearance. Psychologists often look for the mask of sanity in individuals accused of severe domestic crimes. The ability to switch between the role of a suffering mother and a carefree partygoer suggests a lack of emotional integration. The witness testimony that she acted like a totally new person after the alleged death of her daughter indicates that the removal of the burden brought her relief rather than grief. This chilling lack of affect is often a defining trait in the profiles of those who commit filicide. The mastermind label suggests that Gonzalez was not a passive victim of circumstance, but an active architect of her environment. The isolation of the grandmothers is a key indicator of high-level manipulation. By controlling the flow of information, she effectively blinded the very people who were positioned to save her children. The tragedy of the Gonzalez case is not solely defined by the actions of one individual. It is also a story of a profound failure of the social safety net. The question that resonates most deeply with the public and investigators alike is simple but devastating. How does this happen? How does a young individual vanish from the world in 2017 and remain unnoticed until 2025? The investigation has exposed deep cracks in the systems designed to protect the vulnerable. The most glaring failure is the lack of educational oversight. Police confirmed that there are no records of any of the Gonzalez children ever being enrolled in school because they were never in the system. There were no teachers to notice absences, no counselors to observe signs of distress, and no truancy officers to knock on the door. The children were administratively invisible. Furthermore, the role of Child Protective Services has come under intense scrutiny. While the agency had contact with the family, the investigation reveals that they were successfully deceived by fabricated evidence. The acceptance of a document with a forged signature and a false phone number in November of 2023 allowed the case to be closed or deprioritized at a critical juncture. This suggests that the verification protocols, the checks and balances intended to catch lies, were insufficient against a determined deceiver. The bystander effect also appears to have played a role on a macro level. Neighbors saw the family, and acquaintances saw the party life on social media. Yet the disconnect between the mother's lifestyle and the invisible children did not trigger a report until it was too late. The system relies on community reporting. But when a family unit is isolated and the children are kept hidden, the community is effectively blind. The term ghost children is often used to describe individuals who fall completely outside the purview of the state. This case demonstrates the extreme danger of homeschooling loopholes or lack of enrollment enforcement. Without a mandatory touchpoint with the state, like a school or a doctor, a parent has absolute, unmonitored power over the dependents. The forged signature is a symbol of the bureaucratic illusion of safety. The file looked complete. The forms were signed, but the reality was a fiction. This failure highlights the need for forensic verification in social work, calling the numbers, visiting the addresses, and speaking to the relatives directly rather than relying on paperwork that can be easily forged. As the calendar turns toward late January, the city of Austin awaits the next chapter in this harrowing legal saga, the jury trial for Ava Marie Gonzalez. Specifically regarding the 3 child abuse charges related to the sibling found in the closet, is slated to begin on January 26th. However, the shadow of the missing Ava Marie Gonzalez looms large over the proceedings. The case is currently divided into 2 distinct but deeply connected narratives. There is the confirmed reality of the abuse discovered in the apartment, the malnutrition, the confinement, and the corn dog diet, which forms the basis of the current trial. Then, there is the darker, unresolved mystery of the alleged capital murder of the missing daughter, a case built on memories, missing records, and a timeline of silence. The defense attorney, J. Gabriel Hernandez, continues to fight for a delay, arguing that the recent revelations have made a fair trial impossible. The prosecution, having secured a higher bond and rejected a plea deal, appears ready to bring the full weight of the state against the defendant. Whether the trial proceeds as scheduled or is postponed due to the venue change motion, the Gonzalez case has already left an indelible mark on the community. It has exposed the fragility of the systems meant to protect the innocent and the capacity for darkness that can exist behind the closed doors of a seemingly ordinary apartment. The search for justice for Ava Marie, a girl who was unseen for years, is now finally and irrevocably in the public eye. This series has traversed the timeline from the initial welfare check to the brink of a capital murder trial. We have examined the dual life of the accused, the chilling medical evidence, the labyrinth of lies told to cover an absence, and the systemic failures that allowed a child to disappear. As the legal process moves forward, the focus remains on the value of the lives involved. The investigation serves as a grim reminder that visibility is the first line of defense for the vulnerable. Until the verdict is read, the true fate of the Gonzalez household remains a narrative written in court documents and police files, waiting for the final judgment of the law. We hope this deep dive has provided a clearer understanding of the complex legal, psychological, and systemic elements at play in this tragedy. As the situation in Austin continues to develop and the January 26th trial date approaches, we will remain vigilant in following the evidence wherever it leads. Thank you for joining us for this extensive analysis. We appreciate your time and your interest in seeking the truth behind the headlines. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.